change direction just a little bit for the next few minutes. And I just want to say that some of the things I'm going to talk about, I'm going to talk to you like I was your mom. Because I have these two children who are also young doctors. And as I tell the stories, you'll sort of see that, I can be telling it to them as well as to you. So I sort of feel like today, you're my kids. And I want to tell you a few things about being doctors in the world and what you can expect. Okay, every story has a beginning. My husband and I, when we were medical students, decided to take an elective in international medicine. And we went to the country of Bolivia, and we got dropped off at a little hospital high on the Altiplano in a little town called Ancoraimis. And as soon as we arrived, the doctor, who had been there for a very long time without a vacation, decided to leave. Now my husband was a senior and I was only in my second year, so we really weren't qualified to take over the hospital. But anyway, we were left with two nurses and ourselves. Within hours of the doctor leaving, a truck drove up, and a patient was unloaded by her husband, a lady who'd been in labor for about 3 days. And so we were already concerned. So we took her into the examining room, which the nurses helped us find because we'd just gotten there. And as we put her on the table and we pulled back the blanket, because it's very cold at that altitude, we were horrified to see a little foot coming out of the vaginal canal. And so we thought, this is a footling breach, and this lady has been in arrested labor for days. We didn't know the whole story because our language was not that good, but we knew she had been in labor for a long time. So we went back to her husband and we said, please take her on to the next bigger hospital where you can have a real doctor. But he said he couldn't go any farther. He borrowed the truck. This was it. This is as far as he could go. So we took a deep breath, and she was having pain, so we gave her a little medicine for her pain. We looked around for an obstetrics book to review what we should do. My husband, I think, had 1 month as a student of obstetrics. Then we went into the corner and we prayed fervently for God's mercy. By the time we got back and he got his hands all scrubbed and ready to go, she started having good contractions. And by God's mercy and grace, she delivered that baby. The baby lived, the mother lived. After 4 months of this kind of medicine, we both knew this is what we wanted to do. We loved it. We could see ourselves just working for the rest of our lives in a country where there wasn't enough health care, but where we could be a part of this solution. And that's how it started. Well, we went back. We finished our residencies in family medicine. At that time, my husband later became an emergency medicine physician, but at that time we did family medicine to get ready to go back to some country somewhere. And we kind of thought it would be South America, not too far from home, small community, not too many patients, something we could handle. But we were asked to go to Bangladesh. Now, all we knew about Bangladesh at that point was they just had a war, they just had a cyclone, there were lots of refugees, there were 71 million people in a very small area. It was as far away from home as we could go, and we would be it. We wouldn't have a senior doctor to really help us know what to do. So we told our organization, maybe not. I don't think we can do this. We're full of adventure and we're young, but this may be more than we can do. But because they had asked, and they were our seniors, we said we would pray about it. So we went home thinking, this is not going to happen. So the prayer we decided to pray was, God, if you really want us to go to Bangladesh, please give us a desire to go to this hot, crowded place. And not only give us a desire to go, but make it the only place that we want to go. So a couple of months passed, and we noticed that things were changing. As we talked with each other, those situations in that country which seemed to be just big obstacles to us at first started to sound like challenges. Like, maybe we could do this. We got some ideas about what we could do. And then one night, we got out of clinic late and we went to a prayer meeting at actually another church, not our own church. And we slipped into the back row and just sat there through the service. But at the end of the service, we both looked at each other and God had spoken to us. And he had spoken in almost the same words to each of us. And he said, this is what we heard in our heart. It wasn't, no one else heard it but us. We heard Jesus saying, come over to Bangladesh. I have my people there, and they have many needs. And all of a sudden, we knew that we weren't being asked to go to a godforsaken place at the end of the world, but we were being asked to go somewhere where Jesus was already working, where God was already caring for people, and that he was just asking us to join him. Now, maybe God spoke so clearly to us because he knew that our time there would not be easy. And when you are asked to do something really difficult, sometimes it's always very helpful if you're sure of your call. Now, I know many of you have been called into medicine, and maybe some of you are feeling like you're in a hard place right now, a long way from home, or just very difficult studies, or other challenges. So I ask you, just when you're feeling that way, just go back and think, why did I want to go into medicine in the first place? Why did I choose to go to Ukraine? And I want you to know that even if you didn't have a voice speaking in your ear telling you to come to this place or to go into medicine, that you're here because the sovereign God of the universe wants you to be here.
Amen.
You are in the right place, and you can count on that. So we were only asked to go to a country with 71 million people. When you all finish school here, there will be 7 billion people in the world. 7 billion patients. Well, the good news is that means you're never going to be out of work. There will always be somebody at your door, okay? Now, the bad news is that you're going to feel overwhelmed, probably many times in your life, by all those healthcare needs and other needs that are around you. So what do we do when, you've got this whole world in front of you, and there's so much you could do? How do you know where to start? Well, what Ted and I did was we'd gone to the country, we'd moved around, we'd taken a little trip around from area to area, trying to figure out where we should start a small health clinic and project. We finally found a very small village, which is unusual in Bangladesh, and decided that that would be the spot. We wanted to start with something very small and then kind of let it grow. And I want to quote one of our professors here, Dr. Tov, and she said yesterday, it's a good idea to start small, to start simply, and to start slowly, and if possible, let the beginning be strategic. So I think that's really, really good advice. So we did start small, but we had a big vision. And I think that's good too. You want a big vision, but you want to start with something that you think you have a good chance of doing. As we looked at the little spot where we were, there was a broken down building that we would repair and put up some thatched clinic areas. But we thought about, we knew there were a lot of people who would be coming because we'd already worked there a little while and knew how many people might show up. So we knew there'd have to be a place for patients, probably hundreds of patients, to wait. So as we set things up, we put the patient waiting area in a little grove of mahogany trees, and we built a whole bunch of latrines and put a pump out for water because it's hot and people can't wait for hours and hours with that kind of problem. And we determined that knowing we were living in an area that was very poverty-stricken, we felt God really wanted us to be sure that every single patient who came through, no matter what their situation in life, we would treat them with dignity and respect. And we planned to deliver the very best possible health care that we could. We worked on the laboratory, we got the best medicines we could find in the country, tried to set everything up to the best of our ability in that area of the world. And those concepts have been really helpful to us everywhere in the world, because when you treat people with dignity and respect, just that by itself is a healing thing. Now, as you go along in your life as doctors, and as we went along in ours, you're going to have a lot of days where it's just kind of humdrum. The patients come, you take care of them, they go. You're loving them, you're giving them the best care you can, but it's not like every day is not something unusual. But then there are those days where something really good happens. And I just remember we had a young man, we had many TB patients, and we had this one young guy with this young family who was all dying from tuberculosis. But he started coming for his treatments, and he came every single week to pick up his medications. He was faithful to do that. And at the end of, I think it took about 12 months for him, he was well. And that was just a glorious day, a quiet victory. Sometimes God just enters into our lives in spectacular ways. A woman was brought in on a stretcher to a clinic we were having in a very remote area. She was young, and she had hadn't eaten anything or had anything to drink for 3 days, according to her family, because she was actually almost comatose. And when they brought her in, again, she was all covered up too, and as we parted the blankets to see what was going on, she was covered with chicken pox. And from the mental exam, the neurologic exam, we figured she had varicella encephalitis, that her brain was infected and inflamed. As we continued our exam, we found to our great disturbance that she was also 4 months pregnant. So not only were we concerned for her in her life, but we were concerned what would happen to the child if she survived. Would the baby suffer damage from this virus? So what did we have to treat her with? IV normal saline, that's all. We didn't have any antiviral medication. Well, I take that back. We had 1 pill of acyclovir oral, which is about nothing, in the case of this. So we did the exam, we started the IV, we gathered the team around her, and we just prayed for God's mercy. Her husband had brought her in. He was totally distraught. After we finished and went back to our other work, one of our nurses, kept watch on her, kept her IV going. Her lips were all cracked. She was, in bad shape, so the nurse just lovingly cleaned her up, washed her wounds, took care of her, got her new blankets. And we just watched her all day, kept giving her fluids. By the second day, she woke up. By the third day, she was sitting up and able to take some fluids on her own. To us, that was God's grace. That doesn't happen so fast in my experience in the United States, that she would turn around so quickly. And the end of the story is even better. We had to leave that village as she was improving, but we came back a year later, and she had a baby, and the baby was fine. And we've seen her now for several years. The little girl's about 5 years old now, and no mental problems, no physical problems, and Mom is doing well. So, good story. But sometimes it doesn't turn out that way. We had another child who had a burn when we were seeing the lecture on burns the other day. It made me think of her. We took care of this child. We didn't have xenografts. We just had gauze. So we took care of this little child who was badly, badly burned. For days, her parents would bring her in every day. And my nurse would take care of that, and then I would go in and check. And one morning, the mom and dad always brought her every morning, and they were very faithful to do this for this little girl. But one morning, they brought her in, and she was all wrapped up in a shroud. And she had died during the night. And her parents came, and they carried this little baby up to the two of us, and they said, "We wanted to come and tell you because you have treated her like you were her own her mother." And they were so thankful through their tears and ours. You know, not every outcome is what you want it to be. But we can walk through the valleys with our patients. And that gives them comfort and strength. And we need to remember that we're not God. We're not in control of everything that happens. But we can walk this road together, and we can certainly be there for the patients that we care for. And one of the great things about being in medicine is that you can just be learning all the time. There are lots of new stuff coming out, new possibilities, new techniques, new medicines. But the fact of the matter is, most of us are not going to be working in areas where you're going to have the best and the brightest available to you. So you're going to have to be creative in how you treat your patients. You're going to have to figure out, what can I do with the resources that I have that will be the best for the patients that I have. It's just really frustrating. I saw a lady who had chronic renal disease, and it was getting toward where it needed dialysis. She was otherwise, fine. And we were in a country that I think might have had 1 or 2 dialysis opportunities in the capital, and she was a long way from there. And so to have to tell her that she had a disease from which she would die unless something was done, to know that it would be possible to treat her somewhere else and to not have that as an option. She didn't have the money to travel to the city. She didn't have the money to pay for the dialysis if she could even get in, and she would have no one to watch over her while she was there. I think one of the hardest things probably in any country, but especially when you know there's better treatments available and you can't give them, is to have to tell your patient, you have leukemia, and you're probably, medically speaking, you will probably die from this. Now what we can do, and I think there was a class on this, we're not God though. We really are not, and we don't know how much time He's going to give this person. We don't know whether He will intervene in their life in a special way. We will pray that He does. But I think we owe it to our patients to be honest with them as best we can in a sensitive, well-informed way so that they can plan what to do with the information, with their illness, with the rest of their life. On a lighter note, you doctors are problem solvers. We like to see something and fix it, right? We also kind of like the detective mode. I think the mystery illness is, there are lots of TV shows about mystery illnesses where we get to look for the clues. And it is really exciting when you finally get the clue and you figure out what's going on. So as you practice your medicine, some of you, you're going to be in places and you may suddenly, one day, it may not happen often, but you may say, I'm seeing this pattern of disease. I've seen 5 people with this particular thing in the last 2 days. What is going on? Is there a new epidemic? Is there something happening? We had that once happen in Honduras, and we were seeing patients in this village, and we don't usually see a lot of amoebic dysentery. But at the end of the day, when all the doctors got together and we talked with the lab tech, each of us had seen several cases of amoebic, dysentery. We thought, what is going on? Because all the houses had pumps. Well, it turns out the pumps were coming from a water system that was very up to date. But during a hurricane a couple of months before, the pipes had broken. So the system wasn't working, and the people were getting their water from the river. We were able to help the community figure out what to do. And we're not epidemiologists, but it was one of those things that you were able to help out in a situation and eventually encourage them to get their water system fixed. There's a little parable the community health people like to share, and it goes like this, and I'll give it to those of you who may be in this situation. There's a man standing on the side of a river, and he sees someone in the river drowning, and he thinks, oh man, so he jumps in, rescues the guy, puts him up on the bank, and almost before he's finished, he sees another one in the water, okay? So after he's rescued 3 or 4 people, he's thinking, something must be wrong that all these people are falling in the river. So he goes upstream and finds an area, a very dangerous area on the bank where people are falling in, and decides to build a fence so that they won't fall in. Well, some of you are probably, as you go out into practice, you're going to be fence builders. You're going to be in public health or epidemiology. Some of us are going to be the guy, rescuing the one in the water. I think these 2 parts of medicine work very well together, because if you only have the public health, the man in the water needs somebody to rescue him. So there's a place for all of us. God will take us different places, but we all work together. We'll get the job done. Let's see. We're going to skip over a little bit. Okay. I'm going to skip over some other stuff because I know it's things that I'll just mention it real quickly. There are a few things that we can do that are free, okay, that don't cost any money, that we can do when there's no resources for buying special medicine or technology. One of those things is learn to use what you do have well. If you have an ultrasound machine, it can diagnose a number of illnesses you'd never expect. Even, even some eye problems, as well as your regular gallbladder and kidney and so forth. So you use what you have. Then look to the strengths of your patient. His own personality, his ability to change his lifestyle if you give him the right advice. Think about his family, his friends, his support system. What about just the whole power of prevention? All that good patient education that you can give to help the patient take responsibility for himself. I don't think any of you really realize, perhaps, how much your patients really do listen when you give them advice. They've done the studies. Your words are powerful, so use them wisely. And remember, none of us like getting advice from somebody who's kind of giving us a hard time. We take advice from people who care about us, who we love. And listening is a very powerful tool, not just to help you figure out what the patient has wrong with them, but also just to listen to their heart. And you're just being there, like us with the little child, the power of your presence to walk through difficult times with your patient. Okay, well, let's go back again to the 7 million, and the last thing, of course, which I'll mention right here, never, ever, ever forget the power of prayer, because that's the bottom line. We can't fix it, but God can. So you have these 7 billion patients that you're going to be responsible for when you leave here. And they're all, lined up at your door. And you work, as we did, from morning till night, and there was always people waiting. You work 6 days a week, and after a year or 2 of doing that, we became exhausted and overwhelmed with what God was asking us to do back in that village in Bangladesh. I mean, there was never an end. People slept. Sunday we were closed. People would come and sleep in front of the clinic. They would hang their little bottles along the fence if they had to go buy food so they wouldn't lose their place in the line. What happens to us when we get overwhelmed? And you will be overwhelmed at some point in your life. Some people just get calloused. They start to just run through the patients and try not to take on any more emotional baggage than they have to. They kind of withdraw into themselves. They start treating their patients like diseases or numbers. You might even start being very rude to your colleagues. That's not a good thing. Not if they ask you to do something and you're just very rude to them, not good. And even worse, you may start to get that way to your family. I just want you to begin to have some mental checks in your mind. If you start realizing that your personality, your way of taking care of patients is changing, just stop. Just stop. Take the afternoon off. Go home. Talk to your friend. Pray. It's even good if you have a friend who you can be accountable to on a week-to-week basis, who can spot early if you're having some trouble, or that you can spot for them if they're starting to get overwhelmed. I think we doctors think we can do everything. We think we're supermen or superwomen, but we're not. And the burden is really too big for us to carry alone. We really need to look to one another to help us carry that burden. And we need to remember, what Jesus said, that when we are weary and heavy laden, we can come to Him, and He'll give us rest. Medicine is a wonderful tool to help us express the incredible love that God has poured out into us. But it's a tool. It's not your whole life. Don't make it that idol in your heart that we saw yesterday. If you feel like you're being driven to perform, driven to see more patients, driven to work harder, that's not God. Jesus doesn't drive us. He leads us. He's our shepherd. So if you're feeling driven, pressure, you need to stop and assess where you are and let God speak to your heart. Gather your friends to help you there. There's a verse in Galatians that says, having begun in the Spirit, are you going to try to end in your own strength? No. You all are having a good beginning. The Spirit of God is with you. But we can run so hard and so fast that we start running ahead of Him, and that's not a good thing. So, to close it up here, being a doctor, living as a physician, just living life. It's a marathon. It's not a sprint. And you're going to burn yourself out if you're not careful. So take time. Take time to take care of yourself. Take time to take care of yourself physically, mentally, spiritually. Take some time with your family and friends. You may have to schedule it because doctors get so busy. Someone else can be the doctor for your patient, but no one else can be the wife to your husband or the husband to the wife. Amen. No one else can be your mom's daughter or your dad's son. That's a job only you can do. So don't cut them out. Give them time. That's part of our life. So why? In the world, do we doctors and nurses and healthcare people want to spend all this time and energy on both the grateful and the ungrateful patients that we have? Why do we spend the best years of our youth studying and working all night in the hospital? Why do you go that extra mile to be your patient's advocate, to get something difficult done for them? Why do you expose yourself to a disease that you may catch? I don't know, I asked my daughter this question before I came, and she said, we work these crazy hours and do this job for the smile we have yet to see. And I thought, that's an interesting answer. And then I thought of the smile of the little child, smile of relief when you tell someone that they really don't have anything bad. When you see the smile through the tears of that family of that little child. And best of all, when you see the smile of your Heavenly Father, who's the one who called you in the first place into this incredible vocation.